It's experiences I've had.
Yes.
And I really was concerned. I didn't want to write the book, even when I had the opportunity. I, I was like, oh, how many people are going to read it? Will people like it? How can I say something positive about the police when half my work is saying what the police are doing wrong? But yeah, I think if you can overcome those fears, then why not? It's us ordinary citizens that can do small little things to be making a change and making a difference.
Welcome to Risk and Rise, the podcast where we explore the journey of overcoming the fear of failure, embracing risk, and achieving success in entrepreneurship, creativity, and personal growth. I'm your host, Talana Simpson, and I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Together, we'll discover the strategies, insights, and shifts in our thinking and attitudes that are needed to turn setbacks into stepping stones and transform fear into fuel for success. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's episode of Risk and Rise. In Risk and Rise today, we are going to be talking to the investigative journalist Graham Coetzer. He has just released a very interesting and important book. And I wanted to speak to him not only about his book, but about the process of publishing the book. How do we, when we are creating something, whether it's creating a business or creating and sharing an idea through a book, how do we overcome our fear of failure, our fear of rejection, and put what we are creating out there in the world because we know that it can add value? Enjoy the show as we explore risking and rising from a journalist's perspective. Well, welcome, Graham, to Risk and Rise. I have really been looking forward to having a chat with you because I've been speaking a lot with entrepreneurs, and I've always been wanting as we explore the concept of failure and our fear of it, our fear, and dealing with fear and taking risks in life and in work. I've always wanted to speak to someone who's also, and to other people that are not just in entrepreneur, like business. And then you came across my path, and it's because you've just released this very interesting book, Hunting with the Hawks, which we'll talk about a bit more. But just to get us going then, I'd like to just start by asking you, like I ask most people, is what comes to mind when you hear the term risk and rise?
To me, it does sound, it immediately makes me think of the work that I do. So, except for the book, my day job is actually an investigative journalist. And what we do and there's a difference between a sort of normal journalist and an investigative journalist. An investigative journalist's job is not only to report on news, but actually to go and look at what's behind a news headline. What's causing certain problems. So we typically looking at the kind of work that I'd be doing on a daily basis is anything where we can warn the public against scams, against fraud, against crime, against problems in the country, issues in politics and that sort of thing. So the work involves a lot of conflict. You get into conflict with people, unfortunately, by the very nature of it. And what is something I had to learn, because I didn't start out as an investigative journalist, was that you are going to be putting a lot at risk doing that kind of work. You're going to come into conflict with very powerful people, be it in politics, be it in the underworld, where I often do a lot of my stories come from. And you're going to have to rise above that. And to me, the rising above it means conquering sort of your own fear, of failure with that, because it's quite something to get used to. You often see the kind of stories we put out, and you think, oh, it's so nice to catch someone out, but you don't realize what's happening behind the scenes. So to me, it immediately speaks to my work. That's what comes to mind.
Great. So tell us a bit more then about how you got into investigative journalism. As you said, it wasn't what you always had planned to do, I assume.
Certainly not. I have always wanted to do journalism and was doing quite a bit of that, and also filmmaking. I had my own production company. And during that sort of journey, when I was producing some work for international news channels, came across Carte Blanche, which we all know in South Africa, I'm sure, and started producing stories for them. And initially, what we call in at Carte Blanche a soft story. So the sort of feature pieces, um, new medical discoveries, something funny with animals, that kind of thing. And the executive producer at the time, George Mazaraki, said, yes, that's all great, you're doing well, but I want you to start doing investigative work. And slowly but surely got me into it on smaller sort of stories for a start to get my feet wet. And of course, guided by some amazing people at Carte Blanche, some of the best journalists in the country, in my opinion. And yeah, I learned a lot. And so it sort of grew. And once you've made your mark, I think mine was sort of 2012, 2011. I did a relatively big story on a very dodgy tow trucking company. And we got a hidden camera, and it was quite a scary story. And they said, that's it, you're doing investigatives from now on. So that's how I got into it.
And so you said that part of what you've had to learn is how you yourself manage or have learned to deal with fear. Because I know from reading Hunting with Hawks, which you can tell us a bit more about just now, but the kind of stories you've got involved in, I would be petrified to just look at that world, never mind get involved in it. So how do you manage just that? Because there's a strong risk for your safety as you're going into that.
And I think that the risk in South Africa lately just feels like, I don't know why, it feels like it's getting more and more. And well, it's not just that I don't know why. I mean, we live in a country where whistleblowers get murdered, where police officers get murdered, who are working on cases or exposing corruption or whatever the case may be. So those risks are very real. But the first sort of, if talking about conquering fear, the first thing that I had to get over doing that kind of work is even on stories where it's not a direct threat to your personal well-being, but we're going up against a dodgy property developer. And these people they've taken, in one case, they've taken a whole bunch of old people for a huge ride. They've stolen millions. So you go and report on that, and immediately they hit you with lawsuits. They want to try and they try and interdict the story from ever being published. They threaten to sue you afterwards. So that that brings in that whole element of fear. Have I got the story right? Have I done my homework properly? Can I defend that case? And of course, as a journalist, because what you're really doing is you slandering that person. You're saying this is what they've done wrong, and you are very publicly outing them. So they do have a right to defend themselves. That's one of the great parts of our Constitution. But that puts a lot of fear in you as a journalist. You putting your name to that piece, you saying this is what's gone wrong, this is what they're doing, and this is what people are saying about them. And you need to be 100% sure that what you're saying is correct. So part of conquering that fear for me was doing what I call bulletproofing a story. Is so much can go wrong, but there are certain things that I can do from my side as a journalist to bulletproof it, to make sure that I don't get sued, or if I do get sued, that I'm not going to lose that case. And in journalism terms, that would be double checking sources, double checking documentary proof, taking every lead as far as you possibly can. So that at the end of the day, when you do put that piece out, it is as close to the truth as you could get and as humanly possible.
Which is interesting because that's when we look at taking risks, even in business and that, it's about taking calculated risks. So in other words, you don't just jump in willy-nilly and just hope for the best. You actually do the preparation, as you're saying, bulletproof what you are going to present.
And that's not 100% doable. At the end of the day, there is a certain amount of risk. And So I own a production company as well. I'm a freelance journalist, own a little video production company. So I'm in business for myself as well. I do get those moments where we could take this contract, but there's a risk to it. And again, to me, mitigating the risk is, and speaking to but I've done corporate videos for some of the biggest companies in this country, met some fantastic CEOs and managing directors and those kind of people. And when you listen to how they tackle it, that's what I've taken a lot of, I've stolen a lot of their ideas for myself, because they do know how to do it, especially when they're running these huge, mega international companies. But to me, when you do take a risk, your main goal has to be mitigating the risk. If you go ask for an investor today to give you money to start up a restaurant or whatever the case may be, their biggest concern is not going to be, have you got a great idea for this restaurant, et cetera, et cetera. Their biggest concern is going to be, what are the risks and what have you done to mitigate those risks? So to me, I think in life, in business, one of the big things you can do is identify the risks and then see what you can do about them. But at the end of the day, there is going to be, in whatever you do, I mean, we take a risk. In this country, we take a risk driving down the highway, right? Leaving our homes, being in our homes, for that matter, in terms of crime, of course, which is what I deal with a lot. But there is a certain amount of risk. You need to be able to say to yourself, the risk I'm taking has been looked at, has been identified, and I'm going to mitigate as much of it as possible.
And then still take a step forward and do what you need to do once you've done that. Yeah.
I suppose that's the rise. Hey, you have to rise above it. You have to at some point say to yourself, look, is this, who am I? And I found that a lot lately. So, and I'll give you another example. In the last few years, I've done quite a few stories that deals with the underworld, where we've exposed things happening in sort of the gangster side of South Africa, the underworld, where people get killed for any sort of reason. Those to me have become they're really scary, and I've had threats from people in that world where they go, obviously they don't want you publishing anything about them. And it got to a point, I'm married, I have 2 young daughters, and I said to myself, is this worth it? I'm earning a bit of money from it, but is that worth my life? Is it worth the safety of my children, the safety of my wife, that kind of thing? And I got to a point very recently, actually, in life where I said to myself, it is who I am. I want this to be exposed. A lot of people have lost faith in the police. A lot of people have lost faith in what they call the mainstream media. But to me, when you see a piece go out on something like Carte Blanche that I've done, I know what I'm telling you has been researched, is as close to the truth as possible. And the important part about that is it has a bigger picture. We need to be able to shine a spotlight on wrongdoing. And there's that famous quote, if, evil, what is it? When good men stand back, evil sort of succeeds. I can't remember the quote, but I believe in that. I do believe that you have to say to yourself, is this what I want to do? And to me, it is a calling, it is a passion. I'm doing something for the greater good of society. If I can warn one elderly person not to put their money into this scam, or one young person from not going to a nightclub where they're doing dodgy things, I feel like I've made a contribution to society. And to me, that's worth running the risk there.
And that's a big part of courage, actually, is a strong purpose. Our courage only actually gets, ignited when we're facing a fear, but there's a reason we're facing that fear. So, because that's something like I would describe you as a very courageous person.
Thank you.
Because of some of the, no, I've read this book. I mean, I couldn't put it down when I got it, Hunting with the Hawks. The way you've tackled and been involved in some of those, it's because bravery is different because that's an area I specialize in, is understanding and helping people be more courageous. But bravery is when we don't we don't perceive the fear, we just go and do it. But other people would say that is a scary thing. Courage is when we know it's scary, we feel the fear, but we do it anyway. And the reason we do it is because there's a higher reason for us. There's a purpose. And that sounds like what you've got in touch with. Is for you, it's the purpose is way stronger, and it helps you to face then the risks, and with obviously the strategy of mitigating the risk as much as you can.
Certainly it does. And I mean, that still happens every day. We've recently, we went down a mine shaft with a bunch of Zamazamas, the illegal miners. And we'd gone out to meet them, asked them if we could film. I often feel like, and we don't arrive there with armed security or anything like that. I often feel like that kind of thing could make a situation worse. So we'll approach them and say, listen, guys, we want to tell yours, because they do have a story as well.
Yes.
We want to tell your side of the story. We want to know that we're safe. And a lot of that is about that sort of communication between them and them trusting them. But still, that moment they take you down an abandoned mine shaft, you do sort of, your heart does skip a beat. You know, you are like, oh, my soul, is this all going to turn out well? Great footage we're about to get, great interviews, whatever the case may be. But I mean, it's a scary environment. You're wondering if the shaft is safe, because those guys mine the areas of the shafts we shouldn't be mining. So there's a real risk of something collapsing on you. There's a real risk once you go down there. What are these guys going to do? We're arriving there, 200,000-300,000 rands worth of equipment, camera gear, that kind of thing. We've got a presenter with us who's a celeb who could be taken hostage. Anything like that could happen. So, and what I've seen is it becomes like, it's nice to be that we're not the only person doing it. It's usually a very small little group of us, but a lot of that you don't really. Yeah, it's difficult to explain now that I think about it. It's sort of talking about it is actually, but there's a huge thrill in getting it right, I must say, and perhaps that's another part of it. There's that fear of going in. But walking out there afterwards with some amazing footage, some amazing, truly South African stories to tell, does have its own sort of adrenaline rush and its own kick. But you know, it's on the same subject. What I did want to mention is I spoke to police in the book, and members of the Hawks unit called TOMS, which are the Tactical Operations Management section of the Hawks. They are sort of, if you want a quick idea, they're sort of South Africa's SWAT team for the Hawks. They go in and do high risk arrests, that kind of thing. And in the book, I cover what one of their mandates right now is dealing with the cash in transit robbers. So, I mean, I'm sure anyone in South Africa has seen how those robberies happen on our highways. You've got 20, 30 armed guys arriving with big rifles, AK-47s. They've got explosives. They work like a little army unit. And I think many of them do have military training. For the policemen who go do that work, I have so much respect. You say I'm courageous, but I think those guys and women have incredible courage, incredible bravery. It's just not the same. And I've been on some raids with police. I've been lucky enough to do what they call ride-alongs and raids with them, but never at that level. And when you get to that, there's one thing, I mean, even in South Africa and even worldwide, but South Africa particularly, just stopping someone in a traffic stop, you don't know if that person's armed. You don't know how they're going to react. You go on a drug bust. You don't know if those people in that house are armed. Are they waiting for the police? Is it going to be a shooting? So for me, for the guys who have the TOMS unit people who have to go in every single day into a house that they know. So in the book, they find out that these guys are holed up in a safe house. They know there's going to be violence. There's no way these guys are going to hand themselves over. They're all looking at massive prison sentences. They've got everything to lose and nothing to gain. And imagine being that policeman who has to walk up to that house, and you can't just attack them. It's not an army. It's not an armed conflict where two sides can just start shooting. The police have to go in, announce themselves, say we've got warrants for your arrest, and try and effect an arrest. But they
Yes.
know that's not going to happen. So they have to walk in there that day, this morning while we're sitting here and chatting, and go do that kind of work, face that kind of danger. I have immense respect for them.
Yeah.
It's scary work, and I don't know how they do it. And I've asked that question often, how do you? And to them, it's also a lot about mitigating risks. What you also find is there's quite a bit of camaraderie in units like that. They
Yeah.
are particular, the people in that unit are usually hand-picked. So they want to know the person next to you, you can trust him or her not to turn around and run away when things hit the
When the
fan.
bullets are flying. Yeah.
When the bullets are flying. So I find that I think to them there's that real sense of camaraderie and trust in each other as a team. And that's what leads to successes for them. It's that teamwork and trusting each other.
And I remember reading in that chapter, I think another thing is in that moment, they have such an ability to just focus. And even though you describe it as chaos, and I think it is, because you don't know, it's not like you can predict what's going to happen. So it's absolute chaos, but they have such almost they zone in. They have a way of focusing and calmly dealing with the chaos.
It's incredible. I think they
And it
thrive. I must
is.
say, I think if I'm an adrenaline junkie, I think those guys even more so.
Yes.
But like you say, it is, and I've seen that in action. So in a story I did many years ago, we were able to catch sort of quite a dangerous group of people who were doing hijackings and extortion work. And we were we set them up. I pretended to be a victim. I went undercover, a potential victim. They fell for it. And we gave all this information to the police, and they agreed to help us to arrest them and let us film the whole thing. So we were with them as they did this. And what I saw there, and that's sort of one of the reasons I got inspired to do the book as well, because we hear so many negative things about the police. But on that day, we were with a unit, I think about 8 policemen and women, who all knew exactly what they were doing, how to do it. And they took down 2 different cars within a matter of moments, filled with suspects, some of them armed, without a single shot fired. By just being, like you say, they zone into that focus. There's something that happens in their eyes. They
Yeah.
jump out there and they take absolute control of that situation. And this was in the streets of Van der Bijl Park, a very busy street in the middle of the day. That unfortunately these guys started tailing us, so we weren't. The police said no, we need to take them down now, and that happened to be in the middle of a very busy intersection at the time. But by having that focus, by having absolutely no fear, and by taking control of that situation through sheer willpower, really, because they're not a bigger force. They're certainly not. They don't outgun most of these guys. I mean, they've got little pistols when these people come with AK-47s and all sorts of things. Just sheer willpower. They are able to take control of that situation. So I think there's a lot to be learned from that. It's obviously dealing with your fear, but then having that single-minded focus and determination that I have to make this work. And I suppose the stakes are very much higher for them. As you're talking life and death, you have to make it work in that moment. And
Yeah.
it's quite impressive to see, I must say. It's fascinating to see them do that.
Yes, because it's almost like what came to mind was they totally commit to, as you say, making it work. You can't second guess yourself in that moment. And obviously having a team that you really trust and you know how, you work well together. So it must be interesting to see how they develop that, because if at some point someone new has got to join the team, and how
Yeah.
they facilitate or get that experience and that camaraderie, as you say. But that
It's
and
something I
it's
still suffer from a lot. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's one of those things I still suffer from a lot. In many of the stories I do, is I keep doubting my own. I often doubt in my own abilities. I often doubt in the information I've double checked. I've triple checked it. But the night that that story goes to air, I'm still sitting here and I'm like, oh, did I really get everything right? And what I found about it is you might get it wrong. Try your best not to get it wrong. But what I did find is it's that whole situation. If you keep second guessing yourself, you're never going to do it. There can be no rising if you didn't take the risk. There'll be no
Yes.
reward if you don't take that risk. So at some point, and I'm not saying jump off the building, all blindly, but at some point you do have to take the risk. And there's no one in business, no one successful in the film industry, no one successful as a journalist who has done anything but take that risk, take that plunge, and believe in yourself at some point. Eh? I mean, I think we really underestimate ourselves often. And yeah, if you can get to that, I promise you, whatever your goal is currently that you're looking at, you've got a much better chance of succeeding, at least, than if you're not doing it.
Yeah, there's something about action.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, as you say, not that silly action, just jumping, but it's the mitigated risk. So the bulletproofing, taking action where you've done, but that you can only do so much preparation. Then you actually have to just, with the fear, take that next step. Because that's what I wanted to ask you a bit about was that, so as you say, a story is about to go live on air, or like your book that's just come out. There's another side of the fear that could stop us from, like, you could not have written this book because of that fear of being judged or scrutinized, or that. So I don't know if you want to just mention how you handle that and manage, because with social media today, there's so much that comes back that's not informed, useful criticism. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah.
So I must say I've got a fantastic support system. My wife is awesome. I don't think I'd get half the stuff done if she didn't have my back. She's often on my side and she'll push me and say, do it, get over it. There was a huge fear about putting my name on the book, and it's suddenly gotten me a whole lot of it's doing fantastically well, so I'm really grateful for that. But it's put me on another level again. I've had to do a lot of radio interviews, a lot of television interviews around this, and it's putting your name out there, which immediately opens you, like you say, to that criticism. And what's helped, I think, is in the past, especially doing the carte blanche kind of work, you simply cannot please everyone. There's no way. There's absolutely no way you're going to please everyone. We do stories. Some of the trickiest stories we do is anything to do with animals. There are people who are absolutely passionate about animal welfare, and obviously we'd be exposing something bad done to animals or trying to save animals. But even when you're doing that, you'll have people come forward and say, you guys don't understand this, and you'll get the worst comments, the absolute worst comments. Topics like farm murders, anything like that, you get really passionate people, and they will take you to the cleaners, especially on social media. It's very easy most to sit there behind your computer or your phone and write me the most horrific message and tell me how bad I am, how terrible I am. I have learned I don't even give that 1% of my time anymore. I absolutely don't. As a journalist, when I do a story, if I want to say Graham has done X, Y, and Z, I need to go to my office. I need to prove it. I need to bring documentary evidence, emails, phone calls, video, hidden camera recordings, whatever the case may be. They have to agree with this whole group of people, an editorial team that have to agree with what I'm saying and believe what I'm saying. Then it gets legally vetted. It goes through a whole process with lawyers where you can't say this and you can say this, etc., etc. And I have to again prove to them what I'm saying before it ever goes to air. The risk with social media is you've got someone coming on there who's got a plan, and it's great that social media gives us all a voice. The problem is, who are you listening to and what is that person's agenda? And quite frankly, there's absolute crackpots out there, people who you would never in your normal daily life give a second of your time to. but they managed to build up social media followings. They managed to build up, and with the absolute, I mean, they can just put anything out there. We live in a time where people believe in a flat earth. And, it's insane where real scientists have done for hundreds of years, done work to prove all of this stuff. But some guy on social media has got to be in his bonnet and he'll tell you differently. Now, I'm not going to let that guy give me any sort of opinion on my work. I wouldn't ask for him. I wouldn't ask for his or her opinion on any decision I'm going to make in my life. Why would I take what he's saying, take his opinion on me or on a piece that I've done or on my book for that matter, to heart? And I've gone and done a book that sort of is saying that there are members within the police force that are doing fantastic work, and we need to give them credit for that. When I'm part of the media that often says the police are, are failing badly.
Yeah.
But so I'm getting a lot of criticism for that. It's one of the big, people are very skeptical about the police. And I agree with that. That's fine. But what I also believe is that if you keep telling someone that they're doing wrong and that they're bad and that they're terrible, that must sink in at some point. That must affect them. The people in the police who are doing their work, who we need, and we need so many more of them, why can't we give them a little bit of credit? And perhaps by giving some of them credit, like I'm trying to do now, we might inspire one other policeman to do his job or to go the extra mile for someone today. Maybe we inspire a young person to get involved and try and sort out that kind of the issues around crime in this country. So yeah, I'm not going to take the criticism, but it was a concern. I'm not going to lie. I was really worried about it. I'm still worried about it. You never know. It's going quite well now, and suddenly the media turns against you and says, "Oh, well, why are you saying this?" and X, Y, Z. If it happens, I'll deal with it. But again, no one can convince me that we shouldn't be giving credit to people who deserve credit.
Absolutely. And that is such a useful life skill, is to not take the opinions of others to heart, especially when you look at that person's view of the world, where it's coming from and their experience with what you're doing. So it comes back to that believing in yourself, bulletproofing, doing the right prep, the right work, and then believing in what you've got, because you've ticked all the boxes in terms of your rigorousness, that you can put something out there and, as you say, with the intention of doing good. So maybe explain a bit about your book, the hunting with hawks. So we keep talking about it because it is, for me, it did what you hoped it would do. So I actually just wanted to appreciate you and thank you for writing this book and for going undercover in some of those stories and sharing it, because I've always hoped that there were some good people out there because you only unfortunately hear the bad stuff and see it. But I also have utmost respect after reading your book for the hawks and that other, is it tops? What's it, that other part?
Some units, yeah.
Yeah, it's just phenomenal. And so thank you for putting it together and voicing it and helping us to see the other side, because it gives us a more balanced perspective.
I do believe it's a necessary perspective.
Yes.
Are people trying? I mean, the book's not about the hawks as a unit, but as soon as I put the book out there, people are like, "Oh, but the hawks came in after the scorpions and it X, Y, Z." There's so many reasons to badmouth the hawks. And they've had their fair share. And there's been political interference. There's been appointments that didn't make sense in the sort of senior ranks, etc., etc., etc. But then why not? If you can still get up, go to work in the morning, knowing all of this, you as just a normal policeman within that unit, not the person making decisions. If you can still go and do your work, why not give you credit? And other than that, I think there's some amazing stories. I myself, even as doing the work I do, I was completely surprised at some of those cases. They are fantastic. They are just into true crime. Excuse me. Those are absolutely fantastic stories. They read to me some of those stories when I first got on. I was like, I can't believe this is how it played out. They read and sound like something from spy novels. You know, and what's amazing to me about it, again, also because I knew some of what the Hawks did, but I really didn't have a real idea of exactly the scope of the work. If you look at the book, we cover stories about massive cash heists, illegal mining, cross-border rhino poaching, and horn smuggling. They do abalone poaching in the Western Cape, human trafficking cases, an insane amount, a sort of diverse amount of crime that they have to deal with, and a lot of it organized crime, of course. So they're not going up against a little street hustler. The syndicates they are taking on are people who have started crime empires and who do that for a living and who are good at it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, yeah, incredible to see the work they did. I was astounded.
And the other thing that you pointed out with all those syndicates is that they only exist because of corruption. And I think you have to balance that it just takes one corrupt person that obviously, allows so much of this crime to happen, but also taints the name. So as you say, it pointing out those individuals and those teams that are doing the actual useful, productive work. And also I think every chapter kind of ended off with the key role in that crime, that key investigator, and with their hope or their wish or their what's driving them, which again speaks to that purpose. And all of them believe in South Africa. They want to make a difference. They are trying to actually help us as a country. So it was a very interesting book.
I was blown away by, because corruption is, we almost, how do you desensitize to the word corruption in South Africa, and often associated with what's happening in government. But corruption is a much bigger issue, especially when it comes to organized crime. You simply cannot have it without corruption. So the criminals are going to corrupt someone in your organization. And it's very easy, actually. I often ask, but how do they get someone inside a bank? How do they get... It's simple. They come and they offer you huge amounts of money. And that comes down to that person, is how willing are you really to say no to a bribe? And I must say, if you've driven along a road and you've been pulled over by a traffic officer and you've paid a bribe, you've committed corruption. You're part of the system, unfortunately, and it's the easiest thing on earth to do, but you are just as bad as the next. And what scared me a lot is how easily people, and I suppose that comes down to your own personal beliefs and your own view of yourself, but how easily people were able to work for a security company but accept a bribe and say, oh, well, I'll give them the information they need. And we must look at ourselves also. We want to say that the police are corrupt, criminals are doing X, Y, Z. But the fact of the matter is that corruption, there's often an authority and there's often a member of the public.
Yeah.
Which is us. And we need to, and are you, the day someone really offers you that kind of money to do something, are you going to say no? It's 300,000 Rand cash in your pocket. For many people, that might be a few years' salary, Do you really expect them to say no? I don't know. It's difficult. And it comes down to who you are as a person,
Yeah. Yeah, the ethics and our morals and our values, and each person has to make that decision. No way. Yeah. So, is there anything else around failure? I mean, have you had like something fail in terms of your business, or that you can say that you actually, in hindsight, you learned a lot and it changed the way you make decisions, or
I've had some spectacular failures.
yeah.
And business-wise, yes, I've tried going into partnerships with people that haven't worked out. I've made mistakes, I've had big jobs and something's gone wrong. And despite all the trying, and I really have in business and in my career as a journalist, I've really always tried my best to deliver something of value to my client, or to the people I'm doing a piece for. But it does go wrong. And you feel, I think, especially if you're passionate about what you do, it is devastating. And you can't, despite all the mitigating the risk, despite trying your best, things go horribly wrong. When that happens, and I'm probably one of the worst people to speak on it because I often want to retreat into myself, and I don't like to talk about it, even though my wife tries to get me. I don't want to talk about it. I want to sit there and, feel sorry for myself, etc., etc. But it's not going to bring you anywhere. You can let it get to you. You can let it affect you. And what's helped me through those kind of times is often looking at. So I'd like to do a bit of motor racing. I'm a passionate. I don't have all the money often to do it, but when I've got money, I try and do it. So I've grown up next to racing tracks. My dad used to do it. And some of my heroes are people like Michael Schumacher, who was multiple world champion in F1, Valentino Rossi from the MotoGP racing that many people would know. You have to go, if you go look at those guys' careers, okay, often they've started at very young, and it's the typical story of a sports hero. They've done it since they're 4 years old, etc., etc. Along the way, they had many, many failures. Silly mistake. Someone like Schumacher, who was a 7 times world champion, had at the height of his career, at the top of his when he was at the top of his game, he made stupid mistakes in races, sometimes lost him a world championship. So I take heart in seeing that people at the very top of their careers still make mistakes. And why I like the sports analogy even more is that on any given day, someone like a Schumacher in his time, or whoever the current world's top ranked tennis player is, he simply isn't going to win every single tournament he enters. He's a big name. He's got millions of endorsements in him. He's got Nike and brands like that following him. He needs to go and play Wimbledon today, and he needs to play in the final, and he needs to win. And it's impossible for him to win each time he goes out there.
Yeah.
But even at the top of your game, as someone who is recognized worldwide as a world champion, you have to not only have that fear, I'm sure they have that fear of failing, but realize that you will fail. And your day will come. You simply can't always win. Take your top soccer team, football team, rugby team, cricket team, netball team. They only win so many times. So I think the sooner you can accept that failing is part of life, there are lessons to be learned, usually, especially if you can be very honest with yourself and say, oh, yes, I did so and so wrong. I should have phoned. I should have double-checked X, Y, Z. Maybe I could have approached it differently. But I think once you can accept that failing is very, very much a part of life, what have you got to fear? What's going to happen? What is the absolute worst that can happen? That's something one of my bosses also once said to me is, what is the worst that's going to happen? Once okay, there might be some huge consequence. I could lose a house, but I can build it up again. I might lose 100,000 rand, but I could work towards, I made the 100,000 in the first place. Surely I can make it again.
Yeah.
But accept that somewhere along the line it is going to go wrong. That's my 2 cents on it.
No, in a useful 2 cents, because it's so inevitable. And It's more about, I think, how we approach it. So as we were saying, bulletproofing ourselves, and then when it happens, finding a way to get back up again. And as you say, rebuilding.
And dealing with it afterwards. How do you deal with it? So I've been married for 14 years now. And I mean, even in my relationship with my wife, we do have our ups and downs, and we've been through some serious lows and some serious highs. And what I found lately is when I want to retreat into myself and be all sulky and, oh, well, you did X, Y, Z, and I'm not going to accept it, etc. When you sort of draw those very hard lines on yourself and say, well, I'm not taking this behavior, or I've not spoken to you once and this is it, or retreat into yourself, none of that is giving you a positive reaction. None of that is going to fix your problem, fix how you feel about it, make you feel any better about it, fix the actual problem, or get you anywhere. The sooner you can realize that once you do have a failure, how you deal with it is really important, the better for you. So if you've got positive ways of dealing with it, and I've got, I don't know if it's a spiritual thing or a science, I just believe in the more positive energy you put out, the more it comes back. I found, especially freelancing and in business, if I'm sitting here around at home and moping today, or for a week or for a month for that matter, no new business seems to come. No one phones out of the blue. As soon as I start moving around and I'm interacting and I'm speaking to someone about a new film project they're developing, or the idea of a documentary, working on a book, it's incredible. And I don't know what it is. Is it some hidden power in the universe? Is it magic? It's incredible, though. As soon as you do those things, the phone will ring. Listen, I've got a job for you. I've got a story for you. I've got an insane story. I've got footage. It's amazing. As soon as you start pushing yourself into those spaces, it does seem to come at you. Yeah. And there's times where it goes a month or two goes and there's no good news. Deal with it. But at some point, I promise you, if you're pushing towards a goal, pushing towards whatever you're trying to fix in life, it will come to you. It does.
Yeah, and that's what I hear from that is it's about taking the constructive, positive action, not just wallowing in it or just doing more of what creates the problem or it makes it worse. You actually have to, and that's maybe I learned that from the growth mindset when I studied that is all about we can always learn and develop and grow and as you say, like make things happen if we're taking the constructive action. And if we're not getting the results, then the research is showing that we need to just check our strategy. And that's where you say, if you keep doing the negative stuff, you're going to keep getting the negative results. So if it's not working, relook at the strategy, the type of actions you're taking, the type of people you're speaking to, the books you're reading, all of those kind of things can actually shift things and help it move.
It does influence you, eh? Mm. I wholeheartedly agree. And I also want to add to that you have to be very honest with yourself.
Yes.
It's difficult to know when you're in the wrong, especially if you're very passionate about something you feel like you're doing, but listen to the people around you. And yeah, I've often found that if more than one person is saying the same thing to you, maybe there's something to it,
Yeah.
I'm not saying absolutely accept what someone else is saying, but yeah, you have to, I have to be very honest with myself. I tend to, when something goes wrong, take it I take it to heart. I want to go and, like I say, sulk about it and be howling about it and don't want to speak to anyone. It's absolutely the wrong way. But I think realizing that was sort of one of my, not one of my better character traits, but knowing that that's how I react helps to, when that does happen, to sort of then say, oh wait, I'm on my little downward road now. Stop it right here. Take a day off. It's gone wrong. Feel sorry for yourself. Come back tomorrow and then try the fight again.
Yeah. I want to just touch on one thing, and then I've got some rapid fire questions to just end off on. But the one thing you mentioned earlier on is that you learned a lot about was conflict, and the fear of it. The work you're doing is almost like we spoke about the hawks walking into a situation where they know they're going to get fired, shot at, have guns fired at them. You're walking into a lot of situations where, especially if you're confronting someone, there's going to be conflict in that. I'm very interested in how we manage conflict, and I talk about courageous conversations in our personal lives and business lives. But I don't know if there's just anything you can share that you've learned about conflict, having had to learn about it. What tips would you give to us in terms of just dealing with our day-to-day conflict that you've learned from the very serious conflicts you've had to put yourself into?
So the two things I've taken from my conflict that I deal with, and that's part of my work every day, is the one is that conflict, whether you try and avoid it or not, conflict's going to come across your path at some point, and that's in our daily relationships. It's in going to a shopping center and someone wants to park where you want to park. It's in business. It's in politics. It's in the country we live in. It's in the world we are. So accept that conflict, unfortunately, is part of your life. And the second thing from what we do is try and keep your emotions out of it. I suppose that would be one of my top tips is as soon as you, and that's a trick that journalists use, it's a trick that policemen use when they are interrogating someone or asking very difficult questions. When that person gets emotional, you almost know you've got them. At some point, that's when they trip up. They get angry, they get whatever the emotion is. If you let those emotions take control of you and you start answering emotionally, or start making comments emotionally, or fighting from an emotional point of view, it never does you any favors. The more unemotional you can be about it, the more sort of logical you can approach the conflict, the better it's going to be for you as the person trying to win a conflict. In my case, I'm obviously trying to win the conflict. Right? I'm trying to prove that what I'm saying is right and you're lying to the public. So keeping your emotions out of it is a big part for me. And the second thing is really when you've got an issue that you're looking at what's causing the conflict, and understanding it and understanding why certain people are doing what they're doing helps a lot. I mean, there's cases where we've had stories come to me, and it's a silly example, but maybe something people can take with them. I don't end up doing the story. So people have brought me information, Mr. X, Y, and Z is doing so and so. I'll look into the case, I'll speak to that person, and there might be a very good reason. Or there might be a misunderstanding to the whole thing, that people have gotten themselves into something without having looked at what the deal was all about or what the clauses were. So be very careful of absolutely believing that you're right. Double check and then understand where the person on the other side is coming from. There are people motivated by horrible things like greed and whatever, and that's why they're committing crime. But there are also in this country and in much of Africa, and I've traveled all over Africa, people who are in crime because they simply have no other option. And I've seen that with my own eyes. And anyone who doesn't want to believe that, you are blind to the issue. You are lying to yourself. If you are born into abject poverty in areas, not even as far away, I've been to areas in Mozambique where parents have told me they don't name their children up until I think it was about 2 years old, because there's such a high risk of that child dying before then. Because there's no medication. They live in the most rural areas. And this is not North Africa or something. It's right here, Mozambique, a neighboring country. There's hardly any food. There's malaria is a problem, etc., etc., etc. When you come from that background, what chances in life have you had? There's very little for you to make anything. And there's amazing stories of people who do rise above all of that and get somewhere in life. But when you've really had very little, or when you're a father who needs to put food on a table for a child today, or a wife, or a parent, a family member. You need money to get your dying father medicine. There's all sorts of motivation. So I think often if you understand the motivation for the other party, the party you're in conflict for, it helps a lot. It might sort of open doors to resolving that conflict.
Yeah.
I hope that makes
Some
sense.
powerful lessons. Yes, absolutely. It's about and you're saying to keep your emotions out of it. I think that is such a hard, especially if it gets personal. It may be easier as a journalist because you're not maybe the one who's lost money. You've got to, you're passionate about helping people. But I think if we go think of our own personal lives, when it's directly impacts us, it is so difficult here to keep the emotions out. But if we can find a way to manage our emotions, in a way that we can still talk and then hear the person. As you say, there's often a higher intention that is good from that person's perspective, even though we don't agree with how they're trying to meet that intention. The action that they took. It helps to bring compassion into the
absolutely
conversation.
We need more compassion for each other. We're all human beings at the end of the day. We're all stuck in this world together, and we need to try and do our best to make it work. And please, I'm giving you sort of advice from experiences that I've had. It does not mean that I follow my own advice. I'm probably the worst. It gets too emotional. And yeah, it's very difficult to do it especially like you say, when it's something that touches you personally.
Yeah.
And I get so angry that I often find that the best for me lately is to literally take a day to think about something, to respond to a text that's upset me, or respond to someone in business, or even in family life, even with my wife. Take a day, calm yourself down. The biggest mistake you can make is when you especially when you're angry, is to answer immediately.
Yeah.
If you're honest with yourself, sit there and the thing you're going to say next out of anger is not going to do you any good. It's not going to do the other person any good. It's going to be the wrong thing. Would you say this a week down the line? Would you still? And I mean, even work. I've done stories on divorce where there's been. So, for instance, the story I did very, very long ago was on fathers who felt that the courts were very unfair to fathers in terms of child custody. And they'd started a whole organization to fight for the rights of fathers to also have more access to children, etc., etc. And they had a lot of valid points, arguments, but then you go speak to the wives, and there's some very valid arguments on that side as well.
Yeah.
And but what was amazing was just how badly two people who used to be in love, who've had children together, who've been together for 20 years or whatever the case may be, how badly they can end up communicating. By the end of it, it's become so acrimonious. There's simply no more room for even the least bit of logical sort of interaction. The reason they've got, and there's many reasons, but if you think about it, if you strip it down to its core thing, the main thing is there's so much anger towards each other. Every response is emotional. It's no longer to do with what's the best for the kids, what's the best for each other. It's purely emotional. Nothing that person says can be right or work for me. It was quite scary to see it, as an outsider, and to be like, but surely you guys could come together and just talk this out. But it's not the case, as we all know. But that is driven by emotion.
Yeah.
If you could take the emotions out of it and say, geez, we could both be so much better off. They're spending, some of these people, very well-off people, spending millions in court cases. Who's benefiting? The lawyers, the system.
Yeah.
You've thrown 3-4 million rand away in a 4-year legal battle.
Yeah, and it's usually the children that suffer so much. Yeah.
Children suffer, and what did it give you? What did you benefit from it? You're still angry.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that goes back to your points. If I can highlight it just in terms of our learning, then is I talk about having timeouts in those conversations. Is when we know we're getting emotional or we can see the other person's getting emotional, is to call a timeout, because that allows literally the chemistry in our body to subside and gives us time to reflect. And then the next part is to always re-access your higher intention in having that conversation. Because if you can re-access, the intention is to dissolve this marriage in the best way for our children. Do you know what I mean? It gives you that perspective to then go back again, or whatever your intention is to reconnect to, is to maintain the relationship or improve it. You come back then the next day or the 10 minutes later, whatever the time frame is, hopefully with just a different, reminding yourself of the purpose of having this courageous conversation in order to resolve the conflict, but also giving your body a time to subside, and hopefully with the awareness of yourself, as you say, that self-awareness. I'm really angry. I need to, look at that at some point.
I like the timeouts. I'll definitely be taking in my
Super.
arsenal. A toolbox.
Awesome. Graham, if anyone wants to get a hold of you or to learn more about the book, Hunting with the Hawks, is there any way, and they can obviously get this in any good bookstore? It's available.
Absolutely, in most of the bookstores at the moment. It's doing really well. And please, if you do feel like if you're into true crime, I think you're going to find some fascinating stories there. And it's not because I wrote it. I really do believe the work that the Hawks do is incredible, really interesting.
Yes.
And to get a hold of me is, I could give you my email address. It's Graham, is Graham, at carteblanche, one word, .co.za. So anyone ever has stories and that kind of thing, we're always looking to tell those kind of stories. So more than welcome to reach out.
Super. Then to wrap up, can I ask you my quick fire?
Oh, do I have to be worried?
No, just whatever comes to mind, just for a bit of fun as we wrap up. What comes to mind when I say risk?
Risk. My profession, the work I do.
What's your secret weapon for bouncing back from a setback?
Sure. Realizing what I did wrong and what I could do to mitigate that in future. What I could do to get it better. And believing that I can do it better next time around.
Yeah, that's a good way to bounce back. What's the most important lesson you've learned as a journalist?
Sure. It's got a lot to do with trust. I have become very cynical. I don't trust easily. Be very careful about who you trust in life, who you're taking advice from. Realize that people out there have agendas. They're usually trying to sell you a dream or an agenda that they are pushing. Be very, very careful whose advice you follow and why they're giving you that advice. Why is someone giving you a story? Why is someone telling you this bit of gossip? And realizing that not everyone has your intentions at heart, your good intentions, or good intentions towards you.
Yeah.
So be very careful who you trust in life.
And what's the best advice you've ever received I usually say as an entrepreneur, so in terms of as a business person? And
Jeez, that's also a good one, man. It's so cliched, but it really is to me, it's the best advice I've ever received was believe in yourself. Absolutely believe in yourself. Be so careful when someone says to you, you can't. That's crazy. The idea is too big. The dream is too big. There's a fantastic quote also, and I'm terrible with quotes. I remember pieces of them, but the saying is that no one believed in the sort of 1800s, no one believed we could fly. Man would never fly. It was impossible until someone flew. No one believed we could run the mile in under 4 minutes
Yeah.
until someone did, eh? So, and I, you have to be realistic about who you are and what your capabilities are, but don't let it is so quick. I mean, even for me today, where I am, where I'm doing relatively successful in my career, um, it's it's very easy for someone to say something negative and for you to take that to heart. Be very, very careful of criticism. It's not, most of it is unwarranted. Someone that doesn't want you to see you succeed. So believe in yourself.
What inspires you to get out of bed in the morning?
Excuse me. I've got a bit of a flu. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
And for me, lately, it's my kids. Eh? And I must say, I'm one of those. I've sort of always been a bit of a naughty boy, and took me a while to grow up in life. um, my wife had a fantastic role in that, in sort of grounding me, uh, grounding who I am. Making me realize what my values are. But to me, lately, it's my two little daughters. They are absolutely the light of my life. We need to do better for future generations. That is our legacy. At the end of the day, we're all going to, at some point, pass away. What are you leaving behind? And your legacy is your children and future generations. And we should believe in that kind of thing, and we should do better for them. So get up in the mornings. It's for those two little girls.
They're very lucky to have you there as a role model. So as we just end off then, one last parting thought, some specific advice or tip you would give to someone who is struggling with the fear of failure, the fear of rejection as well, in terms of writing their book or making their creative endeavor. What would you give to them to help them to take that step?
I think I'd go back to what we were discussing earlier, Tilana, is that accept that not everyone is going to like your book. Not everyone's going to like your painting. Not everyone's going to like your whatever it is you're doing, especially in creative. The creative world is the most difficult. If I'm selling you this glass, I'm going to say this is a white glass. I'm going to paint it with red. It's this size, and this is what each one of them are going to look like, and I'm going to charge you R5. When you're doing something creative like writing a book, painting a painting, whatever it may be, there are no rights and wrongs. What is a good film? I can promise you, if me and you go and sit in a movie theater, we're gonna and watch 10 movies, we're gonna have 20 different opinions on them, right? So
Yes.
that, especially in creative world, but everywhere, you simply cannot please everyone. Not everyone's gonna like what you've done. Accept it, get over it. Don't let that be what's stopping you from doing it. If completing that book, and for me, it's been a passion. I've loved reading, and I've always wanted to write a book and never thought I could. And by the way, I've had no writing. I've never done any courses in writing particularly or anything like that.
Yeah.
My grammar is not the best. It's often not the best. I really needed the help of editors, etc., etc. I wouldn't be able to give you my little daughter who's in grade 3 right now doing her English exams with all the sort of rules around English. I often don't know my pronouns from my verbs, That didn't stop me from, I wanted to tell stories. I believed that I could tell the stories. I've done it for many years. So, okay, again, there's been a progression. But if you believe you can do it, there's nothing, the failure, your worst enemy is you, if that's the case. If you are struggling with it right now, and I'm not saying it to be nasty, I'm trying to get you to see that your worst enemy, if the thing holding you back right now is your fear of failure, then you are your worst enemy. You shouldn't be worried about what Wimpit on some farm in the Northern Cape is going to have to say about your book, or what Mr. X down here in Gauteng is going to say. And they won't all like it. Accept it.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.
This has been Risk and Rise with me, Talana Simpson. And I really do encourage you to go and have a look at Graham's book, The Hunting with the Hawks, especially as South Africans. It is, I think, an important book. It gives you a very different perspective on not only the crime in our country, but the people that are fighting the crime, which gives me some hope. So please go have a look at the book. And also, if you enjoyed the show and have found it valuable, please give us a rating. It does help other people find the show and helps us to reach more people, because we need more of us to risk and rise together so that we can make a difference in our country and in the world. Thank you for joining me on Risk and Rise, where we face fears, conquer challenges, and rise above adversity to achieve our dreams. Find out more at riskandrise.co.za.